Joan Baez was once celebrated as America's most hauntingly beautiful voice. She inspired a generation with her songs. Yet behind her fame, a darker truth took shape. Her love affairs with icons like Bob Dylan and Steve Jobs, and moments performing with Martin Luther King Jr., hid struggles beneath. Now, at 83, she has left her concert stage behind. Instead, she finds peace in silence and therapy under a tree she calls her counselor. Joan lives quietly, talking to plants, sleeping in a treehouse, and facing ghosts from her childhood. Her father, once a revered figure, shattered her innocence with his actions. Her story is both stunning and heartbreaking. Once a singer for justice, she is now confronting her own pain. Her life started long before her first show. Her father, Albert Baez, was a brilliant physicist. He helped develop the X-ray microscope at Stanford. His intelligence was clear, but his morals made him stand out. During the Cold War, he refused lucrative defense jobs. He didn't want to work on weapons. Instead, he took quieter jobs at universities and UNESCO. Joan recalls, "We didn't get all the things little girls want. Instead, we had a father who kept his conscience clear." Her father's honesty shaped her own path. Growing up, her family moved often. One of the most vivid places was Baghdad. Her father was helping start science programs there. Joan was only 10 when she arrived. The city was hot and chaotic. She saw a beggar beaten by police at the airport. In the months that followed, she watched people rummaging through trash. She saw children playing on crowded streets and animals being mistreated. She read Anne Frank's diary and got sick often. As she grew older, she looked back and said, "Our little souls saw the same things, but understood differently." That year changed her. It made her more caring and opened her eyes to the world around her. Back in California, Joan started seeing unfairness everywhere. She was born in New York, but her Mexican roots often made her feel out of place. Some kids at school called her a stupid Mexican. She didn't fit in with the other Mexican students either because she didn't speak Spanish. Being caught between two worlds sharpened her sense of what was right and wrong. She said, "I was brown and not welcome." But she also realized there were bigger issues for Black people. This understanding influenced her decisions later. She refused to sing for segregated white audiences in the South and chose to perform at Black colleges instead, even if it risked her career. Around this time, her faith also became very important. Her family joined the Quakers when Joan was 8. The Quakers are known for their love of peace and justice, and their values quickly became her own. She remembered hearing talks about war and peace at dinner. When she was 15, she listened to a speech by Martin Luther King Jr. that made her cry. Soon after, she refused to take part in a Cold War air raid drill at school. That small act of rebellion made the local paper and marked the start of her activism. In 1959, something special happened at the Newport Folk Festival. Joan, only 18, stepped on stage barefoot with her borrowed guitar. She sang 2 songs with folk singer Bob Gibson. Those moments changed everything. Her clear, high voice stunned the crowd, leaving them silent. Suddenly, she was the name everyone talked about. Big artists like Pete Seeger and Bo Diddley had performed that night, but everyone focused on Joan. Record labels rushed to sign her. She would perform at Newport many more times, even into her 80s. But that one magical night in 1959 started her legend. The next year, at age 19, Joan recorded her first album, in a small, worn-down ballroom at New York's Manhattan Towers Hotel. It was not glamorous. She sat on a dirty rug with two microphones, trying not to be disturbed by bingo games that took place there. There was no fancy studio, just her voice and guitar. Still, her raw sound made her stand out. The album didn't chart immediately, but eventually reached number 15. It stayed on the charts for nearly 3 years. She decided not to sign with a big label like Columbia. Instead, she picked Vanguard Records for their promise of artistic freedom. Years later, the Library of Congress would call that album one of the most significant recordings in American history. Before fame and records, Joan had quietly gained confidence at a small club called Club 47 near Harvard in Cambridge. When she first performed there, the room was almost empty. She was scared, but there was something about her that people couldn't forget. She seemed mysterious, almost beyond this world. Within weeks, audiences started to grow. Soon, lines stretched down the street. She went from earning $10 a night to $25, which was a lot for a coffeehouse singer in 1959. That small stage became her testing ground. There she shaped her voice and presence in front of an audience that couldn't look away. Her image from those early days, the barefoot Madonna, started at Newport. She sang without shoes then. It became more than just a quirk. Her bare feet symbolized her purity. They also showed her rebellion against the fake side of the music world. People saw her as a saint, even though she didn't want that. She once said, "I am not a saint, I am a noise." Over time, the pressure to be perfect weighed on her, but in her 80s, Joan found peace. She danced barefoot in Paris, not for the crowd, but just for herself. She was finally free to be exactly who she wanted. Everything changed again in 1961 when Joan went into a Greenwich Village club. She watched a rough-looking young man named Bob Dylan perform. She was already known, but he wasn't. Still, when she heard him sing Song to Woody, she was deeply moved. His voice was rough, but his lyrics struck her hard. She said later it tore her inside. It was that powerful. Soon after, she felt a connection when Dylan performed "With God on Our Side" at a gathering. That song changed how she saw him. She realized he had more than talent. He was something special. Over the next few years, Joan used her fame to help Dylan rise. In 1963, she invited him to perform with her at the Newport Folk Festival. The crowd was 10,000 people. They didn't all love Dylan at first, but she believed in him. She took him on tour, gave him time to play, and introduced his music to many new fans. At a concert in Queens, she sang more than half her set to his songs. She told her fans, "Bobby Dylan says what many of us feel, but can't say." When they performed together at the March on Washington, when Martin Luther King Jr. spoke, they showed a new side of music. In her famous "I Have a Dream" speech, it became clear that Dylan had grown beyond just being a songwriter. He had become a voice for the movement, partly because of Joan's support. But as he gained fame, their relationship grew more complicated. By 1965, Dylan had outgrown their partnership. He invited Joan on a UK tour, but once they arrived, he kept her off the stage. She found herself backstage, feeling lost and heartbroken. She didn't understand why he wouldn't let her perform. Then, unexpectedly, Dylan married someone named Sarah, who was pregnant with his child. Years later, Joan said, "Dylan broke my heart. I was captivated by his talent. For him, it was simple. Sarah would fit into his life, but I wouldn't. He wanted control, not companionship. Despite her pain, Joan released an album called Any Day Now in 1968, filled with Dylan's songs. She picked the songs by spreading out his sheet music, closing her eyes, and choosing randomly. 16 tracks made it onto the album, including some Dylan never recorded. The result was stunning. Critics praised her voice, especially her haunting version of Tears of Rage. She even designed the album cover herself. It was more than just a record. It was her way of healing and remembering everything they shared and lost. In 1963, when Joan Baez was just 22, she performed at the March on Washington. She stood before a huge crowd and sang "We Shall Overcome" just before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Growing up, Joan had seen the pain caused by racism. Her father was Mexican, her mother was Scottish, and their family faced prejudice. That suffering pushed her to fight for justice all her life. 4 years earlier, she had made her breakthrough at the Newport Folk Festival. Now her voice echoed across the National Mall, singing a song that would be linked forever to her name. The march brought around 250,000 people, mostly Black Americans. It helped push forward the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Joan's voice became a turning point in history. She was more than just a singer. She represented how music could inspire change and unite people. 2 years later, in March 1965, Joan took part in another historic moment, the marches from Selma to Montgomery. This followed the brutal attack on peaceful marchers during Bloody Sunday on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Joan walked alongside thousands over the 54-mile route to Montgomery. Photos from that time show her standing among the marchers, talking, listening, and being part of the movement. The night before the final rally at the Alabama State Capitol, she performed at a concert called Stars for Freedom with artists like Nina Simone, Tony Bennett, and Harry Belafonte. It wasn't just a show, it was a call for action. Later that year, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. Joan also refused to perform at places that kept segregation going. In the early 1960s, many Southern colleges still banned Black students. She chose not to sing at venues enforcing these rules, instead appearing at historically Black colleges and universities. This was a brave move and risky for her career. During a show at Miles College in Alabama, she arrived as Police Chief Bull Connor was ordering mass arrests nearby in Birmingham. Joan stayed at one of the few motels that welcomed both Black and white guests, joining Martin Luther King Jr. and his team. She didn't just talk about justice, she lived it. In 1964, Joan made another bold move. She refused to pay 60% of her taxes, claiming the money funded the Vietnam War. Her act drew national attention. It marked one of the first big acts of tax resistance during the war. Others followed her lead, and a movement grew. Although she wasn't jailed, her protests became stronger. In 1967, she was arrested twice for blocking the door of a military center in Oakland, California. Her mother was with her, and they both spent more than a month in jail. Many saw this as a strong act of peaceful protest. By the early 1970s, thousands refused to pay taxes that went to fund the war. Some even refused to pay their phone bills, knowing the money supported the military. Then, in December 1972, Joan did something few dared to do. She traveled straight into the war zone in North Vietnam with a group of peace activists. They aimed to deliver Christmas letters to American prisoners and raise awareness about human rights. While they were there, the U.S. launched a large bombing campaign over Hanoi. Joan stayed in a hotel bunker for 11 days as bombs fell above her. She documented everything: the explosions, children playing among the ruins, and a Christmas Eve service that had to stop because of the bombs. Later, she said that was the first time she truly thought about her own death. That moment stayed with her for the rest of her life. Even before the trip, Joan was working on something bigger. In 1965, she used money from her music career to start the Institute for the Study of Nonviolence. She launched it with her mentor, Ira Sand Pearl, in Carmel Valley, California. But not everyone welcomed them. Locals feared the Institute would bring in hippies and stir trouble. They tried to stop it through legal routes, but Joan refused to give up. Quietly, she reopened the school in December. The Institute taught ideas inspired by Gandhi and Thoreau. Students learned to speak, write, and organize peaceful protests. It stayed in Carmel Valley for 4 years before moving to Palo Alto and later becoming the resource center for nonviolence in Santa Cruz. Through all these efforts, Joan kept speaking out. She helped publish a full-page ad in major newspapers criticizing the Vietnamese government for human rights abuses. She called for an end to torture and asked for outside access to prisons. Jane Fonda disagreed. She backed the Vietnamese government and sent a letter criticizing Joan's actions. Their falling out shocked many in the peace movement. It showed even allies could have deep disagreements. In 1991, when Joan Baez was 50, she wrote a heartfelt letter to her parents. She believed she had been abused as a child. Her father denied it, saying those memories were false and planted by therapists. He called it false memory syndrome. Joan wasn't sure of every detail, but she felt something had happened. Later, in a documentary, she explained, "You're never completely sure. But even 20% of it being true was enough to cause real harm." Despite the pain, she forgave her father before he died in 2007. Near his end, she sang to him while he sat in a wheelchair. That quiet moment held deep emotion. Some of her pain also showed in her poems and songs. She struggled with anxiety, depression, panic attacks, and terrible insomnia. Things got so bad that even in her happiest moments, she would quickly fall into despair. She felt trapped, as if she were under a never-ending sentence, she said. Her struggles affected her relationship with her son, Gabriel. She admitted, "I wasn't really there for him. Sometimes I was physically present, but emotionally absent." Her mental health worsened in the late 1970s and early 1980s. After the Vietnam War ended, Joan felt completely lost. She turned to alcohol to cope. She once said that tequila became her closest companion. It started as a joke, but revealed her truth. External circumstances, not inner strength, eventually helped her break free from addiction. Her journey with therapy began early, in 1957, when she was just 16. A psychologist told her parents she had many emotional issues and felt worthless. That initial visit started a lifelong relationship with therapy. Over the years, she kept hundreds of cassette tapes of her sessions, trying to understand her life. For decades, she kept creating and exploring her feelings. In 1970, she released the album One Day at a Time, which surprised many critics. It was recorded at Bradley's Barn, a country music studio in Tennessee, and showed her turn toward country music. Her interest in the genre wasn't a complete surprise. Her then-husband, David Harris, loved country music. He also spoke out against the Vietnam War and served time for refusing to fight. While he was in prison, Joan recorded the album, inspired by David's style and other country records she admired. She wrote Sweet Sir Galahad for her sister Mimi and a heartfelt song for David. These songs revealed a new side of her as a songwriter. A few years earlier, she had also taken a big risk into classical music. Between 1966 and 1968, she worked with composer Peter Schickel, known for his funny alter ego, P.D.Q. Bach. They made 3 very different albums together. The first, Noel, was a Christmas record with traditional songs played with a full orchestra. It showed her willingness to stand apart from the crowd. In 1974, she made another bold move with a mostly Spanish album called Gracias Alvida. The timing was important. Just months earlier, Chilean singer Victor Jara had been killed by the military government. Joan wanted to pay tribute to him and others like him. Even though Spanish wasn't her first language, she sang with feeling and skill, sometimes performing live. Then came the song that made her famous. It all began with a surprise phone call in 1974. Dylan shared the lyrics of his new song, Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts, over a payphone. The words sparked a flood of memories. Viz remembered their past and wrote Diamonds and Rust, a poem that captured the sadness of their relationship. Her words were honest and lyrical, as she recalled Dylan as the restless spirit, a true wanderer with eyes bluer than robin's eggs. Steve Jobs was quickly drawn to Baez's sharp mind and quick wit. Their friendship soon turned into a deep romance that lasted 3 years. Jobs even thought about marrying her, but hesitated. He wanted a family, which wasn't possible with Baez, who was already raising a teenage son. An unforgettable moment happened at a Ralph Lauren store. Jobs suggested Baez should wear a striking red dress. When she said she couldn't afford it, he bought it for her without hesitation. Then there was Kim. Joan's relationship with a woman named Kim was almost unheard of at the time. She openly talked about it in a 1972 interview and brought it up again in her 2023 documentary, I Am a Noise. Kim represented a free spirit. Unbothered by public opinion, Baez remembered walking through town with Kim. They wore boots, suspenders, and unkempt hair, acting like rough types. That relationship gave Baez a new view of love. It was calming after her past with men. She believed leaving out this part of her story would have been false. Today, Joan Baez still climbs the tree behind her house. In summer, she often sleeps among its branches. She calls it magic. Birds fly nearby, enough for her to feel their wings breeze. She once fell while climbing down and needed the hospital. Still, she prefers the tree over seeing a therapist. She says, "The tree is my therapist." Even in her 80s, Baez dances barefoot for 15 minutes each morning. She moves to the Gypsy Kings, clearing her mind. She says this lifts her spirits and helps her stay centered. In 2020, she held a solo art show featuring portraits of activists and freedom fighters, which was well received. By 2021, she organized a second show with figures like Kamala Harris, Greta Thunberg, and Dr. Fauci. Her painting of Fauci, titled Trust, gained lots of attention online. Her art keeps her searching for justice, just in a different way. Her 2023 documentary, Joan Baez, I Am a Noise, revealed stories she had never shared before. She spoke openly about the abuse she faced as a child from her father. She also read personal poems from her own heart. Many of these poems were written during her therapy sessions in the early 90s. They reflect parts of her deep personality. Instead of gossip or love drama, her poetry focuses on childhood, memories, healing, and growth. Among these works is a simple, respectful poem about Bob Dylan. It has just a few lines, remembering the talented young man from Duff.